Well, folks, thanks for tuning in today on Monday, the start of a new week, and looking at Stockwell day-to-day news. Some of the things that we predicted on Saturday for you to be aware for the week ahead are already unfolding. Let's look at that. Let's look at Iran. Let's look at what it's doing in the stock markets, how it's going to affect your grocery prices. Let's look at Prime Minister Carney in Canada wanting to take over the grocery market, it appears, and some kind of wild stuff going on related to trends in clothing, women's clothing, rentals, and other stuff. Stay tuned right now. Let's jump into it. Yes, it has happened. Apparently, there's been a signing now between the U.S., Iran, and some other parties that is purported to be bringing peace to the situation. They say that Iran has agreed that it will allow for the opening up of the Strait of Hormuz. They're not going to be bombing any ships anymore. And they say they will enter into negotiations for what it will look like to end their nuclear program. A bit of a risky thing there because those negotiations on the uranium side could take up to 60 days. But it's being seen positively already, the reactions around the world. You know how I've been talking about it the last few weeks. The degree of tension is directly related to what is going to be the price of oil. So as you recall, even 3 weeks ago, I was talking about pointing out that oil sometimes was hitting West Texas Intermediate or Brent are the two main trademarks in terms of the price of oil, and that was sometimes up over $120 a barrel. Then it was hovering around and staying just under 100. And you'll remember that I've been saying if anytime it looks like there's some stability, the price drops, and it's now down to $82 a barrel, way down. That doesn't mean you're going to show up immediately at the pumps, but it means the long-term trend for your gas when you're traveling this summer is going to be lower. So we'll just see what happens on that particular situation. Already, you look at the markets, I talk about what's called the S&P 500. That's the investment group known as Standard & Poor's, and they look at 500 companies on a daily basis, how their stocks are doing. So that has bounced upward. And then another major measurement is the Dow Jones. That's another group of companies that are measured. That is up, and it's not just in the U.S., but in Germany on the DAX stock. We see it moving up there. In the U.K., the FTSE is the main measurement they use. That stands for the Financial Times stock exchange, and that has bounced upwards. Over in Asia, the Nikkei is at 225, and even in Korea, it's called the KOPSI, their stock exchange there. That's up. Australia dropped down there. It's called the Australia 200. So in that particular one, they look at 200 countries. That has moved up. So good news generally on the economic front there. On the shifting to a different war, there's been a real nasty turn taken. Russia has hit the famous cathedral in Kiev, known as the Dormition Cathedral, damaged it. This is an iconic Orthodox cathedral, one of the most famous, one of the most important in the entire world, being hit by Russia now by their drone missiles. And the head of the Orthodox Church now referring to President Putin in Russia as the Antichrist for doing this particular thing. So it'll be interesting to see what some of the big commentators who have shifted lately, like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, they've become real fans of Russia, stunningly going over there and shopping at a couple of grocery stores in Moscow. Moscow, of course, being the capital city, always features what's best going on in the country, ignoring the fact that half of the country in Russia doesn't even have plumbing. But anyway, Carlson and Candace Owen have been raving on that. Let's see if they continue to rave on this story about Russia, because they say Russia is the great upholder of Christianity in that part of the world, and here they are bombing the Kiev Cathedral. When we look at that, also a very disturbing story coming out of Russia, the story, it happened with the Russian army, or been happening with the Russian army, but this is coming out now of human rights groups out of London who have now got up to 226 confirmed cases of women who are being not just raped by Russian soldiers, but actually taken captive and maintained in a kind of a sex slavery situation. Sophia is the name being used by one. Her identity is partly being hidden there, but we've got her last name, and she is in the UK and testifying in great detail about the city. She was captured from her own town in Ukraine, taken to a city in Russia, not far from the border, by a Russian soldier, and kept there for over a year, locked up and kept in sexual captivity. The soldier was finally busted because he'd actually been doing other things like stealing from the Russian army. Sophia was able, at one point, he had left his phone inside the apartment and locked her up with all of the chains, etc. And she was able to make a call that started then. A group was appointed, including some Russians and others, to go to the city where she was locked up. They found her, and this is not a one-off. It's been happening there, and so I think it's going to be interesting, in fact, to see now is Tucker Carlson going to stay remaining a big fan of Russia? How about Candace Owen? Is she going to stay in that position? We will see. But lots of interesting and disturbing things continue happening on the Ukrainian front. The National Post in Canada today is got some interesting articles, and it's related to, we've got this Safe Social Media Act, which on the surface appears good. It's called Bill C-34, and it's the government saying they're going to protect kids from the internet. As a matter of fact, not allow kids even to get on the internet. So that's getting sort of mixed reaction. I'm definitely one for limiting the amount of time that any of us spend on the internet, especially if we can protect our kids. But the Digital Safety Commission that's going that is looking at all kinds of different ways to zero in on Canadians and restrict what we can see on the internet. So where there's a need for some good policing there, this could start to get a little carried away. There's coming along with this is Bill C-9, an act that's supposed to be combating hatred, but in fact, the main focus it's been getting is the fact that it gives a great deal of ability for even any citizen who's upset with the reading of a particular Bible passage can lay charges and have a person prosecuted, even a minister who is reading from the Bible from his or her pulpit. So you put that along with the digital safety commissions, and then you look at some of the Supreme Court rulings where they talk about hatred, and this is guiding some of the liberal politicians. And they say, well, we're not going to be too definitive, but look for hallmarks of hatred, is what the court has said. Look for hallmarks of hatred. What's a hallmark of hatred? Well, they just toss out some examples to give guidance. For instance, referring to groups of people as animals, that could be a hallmark of hatred. Look, I'm not one for wanting to get, have people using abusive language and calling people names. I will say, however, it is very dangerous when you get the government starting to restrict this, because eventually, as we've seen in other dictatorial regimes, it starts to get to the place where even criticizing government can wind you up in trouble. If you make any references to pedophilia and you even talk about certain activities on the internet, that could wind you up in trouble. That could be seen as hatred. If you're referring to any individual or groups who might be having, in terms of their own mandate, plotting to destroy civilization. Plotting to destroy civilization can be determined as hate language and can wind you up in jail. So it's not just at the federal government. We see in Quebec, which has always been very aggressive in terms of how they want to control religion and control thoughts of people. And they've got their Bill 94, which is restricting people from wearing religious symbols of any kind, especially in public service or in places like schools. And now that's affecting some of the volunteer activity where moms are volunteering after school to take care of kids. and this is in regions where there would be obvious Muslim populations, so the women would be wearing their hijab or their headscarf, and they are being told, this is moms from the community, this isn't even teachers, they can't do that. So just the encroachment of government is something we always have to be careful of. Another thing that's alarming, and I've talked about this now, I first raised the issue about 3 or 4 years ago, excuse me, when I heard governments increasingly using the term food security, because people, if they start to complain about or get concerned of the price of groceries, then governments, of course, always wanting to win votes, say, well, we'll protect you from that. Listen, governments should be looking into things like price collusion. That should not be allowed, and go after any companies that are between each other planning and plotting to raise prices rather than letting competitive realities kick in. But the announcement of Prime Minister Carney is that he's going to be investing up to $3.2 billion into this question on food security and keeping prices down. Even kids who have Kool-Aid stands know that you keep prices down by allowing other Kool-Aid stands to exist or other competitors in the market. Anytime you can try to control that, you're going to have prices going up. And so the government is talking about investing hundreds of millions of dollars, actually over $1 billion, in what they call transmission hubs. These will be large areas, government built and controlled, where people can bring products to sell. Folks, that's called that's called farmers markets. That's called food markets. They already exist. Why is government? I'll tell you why government is getting into this business, because they want to give you the sense that they're there to protect everything from cradle to grave, especially your food prices. This type of thing, $3.2 billion, folks, this type of thing, increased government involvement, it's always under the guise of security and safety. This is not good. I don't like the trend. Allow food markets to flourish and lighten up some of the regulations, which go way too far in terms of people being able to cook certain products and make certain products and then sell them. Yes, there should be some safety regulation, but it goes way too far. So keep an eye on the government, more and more so-called investment in the food market. Lower people's taxes. Lower the permitting regulations that are required. Make it safe but easier to get into business. These are the things that will keep prices down, not taking over the food market. So this area of concern, and I believe, needs to be watched, needs to be looked at very carefully. There's an interesting story, the Dallas soccer game that took place last night, and Japan was playing, and there was some of the fans, the Japanese fans, were holding up signs saying Japan Pride. And then what that meant was, after the game, this is unheard of, unseen in certainly North America or Europe, Japanese fans with large garbage bags helping to clean up the garbage in the stadium. Unheard of in terms of a North American context, and getting a lot of favoritism there in terms of, I call that a new kind of pride. That's the kind of pride people can get behind. So we'll see if that trend continues, if anybody picks that up in Canada or the U.S. It's interesting, the ongoing battle between, should we be using the word soccer or should we be using the word football? Lawrence Watt, the journalist, has a good column on this today, and he's talking about the fact that actually the word soccer is not a Canadian or U.S. invention. It was being used already in the late 1800s in Great Britain. As a matter of fact, there was an article in 1899, way back in 1899, in the Daily Telegraph, and always looking to shorten certain terms. For instance, Rugby Association, rugby for a while was just called rugger, and it still is a little bit, but when I was going to school a million years ago, it was called rugger. So they just naturally shorten up the term, and the uh, the association, the football association that was developing then in the late 1800s, the short or abbreviation of association or soccer, that's where it actually came from, trying to let people know the difference between rugger or rugby and football or soccer. So it actually was a UK term, and it is, of course, used more in Canada and the US because we have our own brand of football, a game that is quite a bit more rigorous in terms of body contact. And so to differentiate it in the US and Canada, fans there, and even to a degree in Australia, Australian rules football is very different than soccer. So it was the Brits who came up with the word soccer. It's okay to use it, folks. Don't feel badly about it. There's an article you might want to take a look at. We like to see what's happening with the Gen Z crowd and millennials sort of into the 20s and 30s. In the Atlantic magazine, the clothes renting business is huge. Renting clothes. And there's, you might think, oh, come on, it can't be that big. Well, one of the biggest women's clothing rental companies is a company called Nuuly. Now that's spelled N-U-U-L-Y, play on words there, Nuuly. And for about $98, for $98 a month, you can get 6 different outfits a month. Now you might think that's high, but 6 outfits instead of buying new for $98 a month isn't bad. They have 477,000 subscribers on that. The Nuuly rental site has 477,000. That's as of today. And the reason, they're saying the reason for this, because with so many, especially younger women, posting daily or multiple times a day on networks like Instagram, you don't want to be seen wearing the same outfit twice, apparently. And so that's driving some of it. The clothing business, we'll see if that keeps up. It's called the constant drive for newness. Well, watch tomorrow on TV. Those of you who unfortunately watch The View, a very left-leaning show, as you know, with the women in the U.S. By the way, there was an analysis done in 2025 with all of the guests. There was 325 different guests came on to that show, and a total of 2 of them were identified as small c conservative. So of 345 guests, a total of 2 identified as small c conservatives. And big announcement, Vice President J.D. Vance, if you like following some of the U.S. politics, is going to be on The View tomorrow. The View has traditionally just trashed that guy, so he's going to show up there and be on there. And that kind of coincides. People magazine has an article out just today and yesterday. It's kind of renewing this discussion about the faith of J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance's wife, Usha, will be talking about how J.D. Vance came to embrace the Christian faith, how she eventually told him therapy wasn't working, maybe you should try going to church, and going to church is working for him more than the therapy. Anyway, watch all that, kind of an interesting coincidence there. The whole FIFA soccer series coming up and being right now in the U.S. and Canada. So many people from around the world actually now traveling to the U.S. and big cities in the U.S., never having been to the U.S. before. And interviewers are doing these amazing interviews, like people are going into stores like grocery stores or Best Buy stores, or virtually any type of store, restaurants. They're totally blown away by the amount of choice and variety that a U.S. free market system allows, and that the prices are considerably lower in most cases than you get in Europe. And the Scottish fans were completely blown away, I guess, in Boston Stadium in the game over the weekend, because the New England Patriots, of course, who are famous as cheerleaders, they were out there as cheerleaders in one of the games, and it just, let's just say, it rocked the Scottish folks to the core. They loved it. Well, Gwyneth Paltrow is running into a bit of criticism. She, of course, advertises many different products, and she's advertising a lifestyle type of apartment building, a high-rise apartment building, and the benefits of being in a building that's near a park. Unfortunately for her, that particular building is in Herzliya, Israel, and it's just amazing how celebrities have come unglued attacking her for advertising. And by the way, the building of that particular for high-rise in Herzliya, Israel, and I've been to Herzliya, it's a beautiful area, thousands of jobs provided to Palestinian workers in the building of that. And of course, Arabs can buy in that building. And underlying the fact that thousands of Palestinians every day are allowed to cross into the border to pursue into Israel to pursue their occupations, be it as a trade or be it in work in doctors or as nurses, whatever it might be, that never gets covered. Tens of thousands a day cross the border to pursue their occupations, because with Hamas and the Palestinian Authority running the economy in the West or the so-called Palestinian areas, the economy has, of course, been in the dumps, not just since the attacks on Gaza, but in the dumps for decades. And anyway, Gwyneth Paltrow picking up some criticism, as did Leonardo DiCaprio a while ago. He was also advertising a product, beautiful living facilities that were in Israel. So he's getting beaten up pretty good. Well, talk about beating up. Yes, it did happen. In fact, the big mixed martial arts fights, the UFC fights that took place on the White House lawn last night. For those of you who are interested, I don't know if I'm pronouncing the names right here, but Justin Gaethje did in fact beat, or the main match there was with Ilia Topuria, but there was quite a number. I think there was 14 or 16 fights in all. Donald Trump, of course, showed up with the head of the UFC, that's Dana White, and the whole thing was deemed an overwhelming success. And some people were saying, well, they shouldn't be having such, things like physical, brutal contests at the White House. That goes way back. Actually, President Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, who was elected back in 1901, one of the first things he did in the White House was he built a boxing ring in the White House and kept it active over the 4 years that he was there. As we've talked about that before, just want to kind of re-emphasize that in the light of what just took place there. So, folks, lots of fighting going on, some of it resulting in friendly fire, some of it getting nasty. Let's keep an eye on the Iranian situation. Thanks for tuning in today. Catch you tomorrow.